somewhat inconsistently named Sonic Racing sub-series of games have been steadily releasing since the early 2010s, and with Crossworlds on the way, the topic of these games has been on the public discourse again, with various highs and lows along the way. Not counting Sonic Riders, which is a much more Sonic-themed racing idea that I'll talk about in another video, Sonic in a car specifically has been a long-shelved idea that, despite seeming like an odd concept initially, is actually quite fun. The first game in this revival was Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, which was a part of the Sega Superstars series. Apparently Transformed is as well, but you can already see the direction these games were headed by the emphasis of Sonic on the title. It's honestly a very charming game with lots of bright colours, multiple selections of music and vehicle variety. The menu layout is a little outdated, even for the time, and I did think choosing one level motif and making 3 tracks based on that was a little strange, but I've been led to believe my whole life that Sega were on the brink of bankruptcy throughout most of the 2000s and 2010s, so reusing assets makes sense here. One thing I thought was odd was the lack of post-release support. Some awful DLC that just unlocks all cars and tracks for $5, which I don't even know if you can buy anymore, and Ryu and his forklift all the time for some reason. There was a lot of drama at the time about Knights or Ristar, and they were added as a flag waver and in the background. What an insult. One DLC pack was Metal Sonic and the Death Egg, which is a bit more substantial and could be a spark of things to come, but that was it. One common thing that happens with Sega is their stuff getting leaked, and this was no exception, and expect it to happen again. Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed released only 2 years later, which felt like a long time back then, and it takes it up a notch with its innovative vehicle swapping mechanic, and is easily the best one released so far. Released really quickly, this game is excellent. It has a lovely art style, user interface, game modes, and can be quite challenging if you want it to be. It has a lot of throwbacks to old Sega stuff too, which are some of the best tracks in the game. What would become the standard of just one song per track starts here, and I don't like the fact that everyone's vehicle is similar. Maybe it was to incorporate the transforming mechanic, or it was to make things more universal, or it should stop people like me and my friends blocking the track online with Eggman's monster truck in the previous game. Either way, I've never liked Shadow not on his bike, and I've been disappointed ever since. Support after launch was once again pretty lackluster. There was a pre-order bonus that eventually became DLC with Metal Sonic and an Outrun map, and that's it. So half the DLC for this game is just DLC from the last game. The Death Egg track from the last time appears in this game as a selection of the 4 standard car-only racing tracks from the last game. Don't know why we couldn't have just had all the tracks for an even bigger experience, but I guess you could still buy the original game new back then. Team Sonic Racing then came out 7 years later in 2019, dropping all the other Sega characters and focusing on Sonic specifically, as Sumo Digital felt like they could explore more of the Sonic universe. Once again, this game was leaked. And honestly, this one didn't hit right. The Sonic theming is nice with good customization, the music is good with some classic Sonic tracks like Sandopolis, and the team mechanic can be interesting. But the game overall just feels like a generic racer that Sonic just happens to be in, not a Sonic racer. The graphics are nice, but just feel kind of standard chroming on the vehicles. The same 3-track format from the first game is back, with reused tracks on top of that. And even the logo feels very muted. There's a story here and it's fine. It's nice they added something to lengthen the game. The challenges can be quite tricky as well, not as difficult as the last game. This is also where the theming of the R in the ring is now the Sonic Racing logo, as well as showing where this Donpar character came from. It definitely feels like new Sonic though, because nobody ever shuts up. I get teams need to have banter with each other, but it just gets a bit much sometimes. This is also where the reliance on items starts to creep up. The last 2 games had power-ups, every kart racer does obviously, but they were mostly useless and only existed because they had to. You could dodge a lot of them very reliably, and your skill would be what would take you to first place, especially in Transformed, instead of just items deciding everything like a Mario Kart does. Once again, however, despite the game doing fairly decently critically, the game was completely dropped after launch. They said sales weren't very good to warrant DLC, and the game just sort of faded off from all memory at that point, even if I do still see people buy it occasionally. I'm not a big fan of DLC, and I don't expect or want it to fix a game's problems, but Sonic Team have just been allergic to DLC for a very long time. They had the right idea with 06, and more so Unleashed, of releasing hard modes or new zones for a couple dollars a pop, but all of these games just got abandoned after launch. Sumo Digital were in charge of the last 3, and not Sega or Sonic Team themselves, but it just seems like a no-brainer. Even Sonic Generations had just a pinball table, and that game seems prime for extra content. They claimed sales weren't very good for all of the Sonic races, but they still made more, and people still play Transform to this day. And out of all the consoles, I still see the Switch selling the most for Team Sonic Racing. So colour me confused then that just 5 years later, during the hype of Shadow Generations last year, we get a teaser of Shadow once again in a car announcing Sonic Racing Crossworlds. I honestly just could not believe it. After them dropping Team Sonic Racing like a bad habit, they just announced another Sonic Racing game with what feels like so soon since the last one, especially after I learned that the last game didn't sell so good. However, it looks like they have enough sponsorship deals to recoup the money on this one. But this is the complete opposite of what I would want from something like this. Sonic Team are the devs now, and looking at the character roster, more than half are going to be DLC, and they aren't all from Sega branded series. The SpongeBob DLC looks fun for a laugh, but I'm a bit worried because there was no voice lines in the trailer, so I'm wondering if these extra characters are going to be silent to save money, but that doesn't really make sense because they're also spending money to get the licenses in the first place. I don't want this just to become some free-for-all like people say Smash Brothers is now. Sonic and Snake in Brawl were two exceptions because they were special for that, but now it just seems like anybody can get in. They really do seem to be pushing hard for this game to be a success though. There's been 2 betas and a demo release already, and there's a lot of aggressive 90s era ads and cross promotion between all the other franchises that are going to be involved. Other Sonic races had slight crossovers, but it's nothing like this. And as previously stated, it's similar to the evolution of Smash Brothers. And now this game has a chance to knock it out of the park after the failure of Mario Kart World. Insert clickbait YouTube title here. There was a lot of forced drama online about whichever game gets released first will win, but after World, I'm not so sure. The game, funnily enough, seems to have some similar ideas that game has, whereas last time Sonic Transformed is the one that had its ideas copied, and now we have this. I've been told that the first beta for this game wasn't very good, but by the time I played the second beta, a lot of the item chaos had been reduced somewhat to make it not feel so casual. I dread to think of what it was like the first time because I still feel like it's a little too much sometimes. I'm still not a fan of the increased item usage, and I hope you can turn it off in some modes. Some races it would just have me go from first to last like a Mario Kart, but then others it felt like old times of me just leading the pack. So now we just need to have the audience cheering for you when you're in the lead for a long time like they do in Transformed. When I first played, I thought the game was horribly slow, which is what I thought my friends meant by the casualisation of this series, but then on the next race I saw you could choose your speed, and the third setting improved things a lot. So just ignore the first 2, and hopefully the others that aren't unlocked yet will be the speed that I want. The customization is also very good, and it will keep people playing for a long time. It's a good, natural evolution of this type of customization we saw in the latest Riders games, and with Team Sonic Racing. It's also nice having extreme gears back, even if they obviously don't feel the same. Hopefully there's some sort of story incorporating the crossword mechanic. I would like the track I picked to be the only track I race in, but I understand that's the gimmick of this whole game. It reminds me of the Race of Ages track from Transformed actually. Driving through all 3 tracks back to back for the final race in the Grand Prix is honestly a great idea. However, there is something about it that feels somewhat small and limiting, with everyone basically feeling the same, and the whole game seems designed to get you in and out of races as fast as possible, which may or may not be a bad thing depending on how you look at it. And again, as I've mentioned, I don't like the over-reliance on items, as now it seems like they've dived headfirst into pickups. But even that seems toned down after what I heard about the first beta, like I've mentioned already. This feeling is probably down to it being different devs though. All in all, this game looks to be pretty good, and has already done fairly well with the beta test feedback and the demo. However, it seems slightly pricey for just being a kart racer, but if Nintendo can charge even more for something with 3 hours worth of content that's dead on launch, they can charge just slightly a bit extra than normal for something like this. Just who knows how long it'll actually last though.